whether or not there's any chance Erik Ten Hag stays on at Manchester United. There was a report that actually came out that that the Manchester United ownership group are going to take their time with making the decision. Erik Ten Hag has said repeatedly he's confident he'll be the manager. He has conversations with the new sporting group, but whenever you lose a game like they lost against Crystal Palace, and when you look at the end of the season, things could go, horribly wrong. horribly wrong. Let's say they get slapped up in the FA Cup final and they lose their remaining games in the Premier League, which is kind of a likelihood at this point, which is kind of scary. That kind of entering the summer with that kind of sour note, it might leave the United owners with no choice, because if they do keep Ten Hag, it's like, wow, so we're comfortable with this level of mediocrity, this level of embarrassment. Is that the kind of statement they want to send to their fans in their first opportunity to really show their footballing brilliance to the United supporters? So Ten Hag's position as a manager, has to be at risk after this kind of season. Jim Ratcliffe and the rest of his team, they're gonna have to make a decision, and they're probably gonna have to make one after the FA Cup, after the season, because you can't cut bait with them right now. I saw Michael Owen said that, but that's never gonna happen. They're not Tottenham. They have a trophy that they're still trying to aspire for at the end of the season against Manchester City. But after that 4-0 loss, you have to say he's definitely like hanging by a thread, a very, very loose thread. And the fact that there was already huge pressure on him before that, and then that happens, and you could see in his press conference, usually in the press conference, he tries to take a more of a optimistic approach, like trying to defend his team by saying we had these opportunities, or that the referees did this, did that. During this press conference, there was none of that. It was, kind of looked like a dead man, a broken man, a man that knows, he could be up. And now with them facing Arsenal, Newcastle, and Brighton, and not controlling their own destiny to get that European spot. It's a rough time. And I'll have to say the players that he has signed, some of them don't make no sense to me. Casemiro, okay, you're coming in. You're bringing him in for experience. You weren't able to get Frankie De Jong, who he constantly talked about to Gary Neville. He talks about how Frankie De Jong will allow him to play the Arsenal way. Okay, well, you weren't able to get Frankie De Jong, but you signed a Mason Mount for that kind of amount of money. You signed Eriksen, a Casemiro, an Anthony for $100 million. Now that really could be that, like, making those kind of signings are kind of the end of you. When you're making $100 million signings that you wanted, that you completely backed, and he hasn't made any sort of impact at Manchester United. Those are the kind of signings that get managers fired, So some of his signings have been questionable. And yes, he hasn't had a proper, especially that first year, a proper footballing background, like footballing system around him with football development, scouting, all that. But still, there's no way. They're now 6, and they could still finish below Newcastle. They're seventh now, and they can still below finish Newcastle. They've conceded so many goals this season. It's just wow, so many goals this season that they have conceded. I believe they're now at 81 goals conceded this season, I believe. For Manchester United, yeah, they've conceded 81 goals in all competition, which is the most ever, or the most for the last 45 years. And they've only scored 52 goals in the league, which is the lowest of any of the teams in the top half of the Premier League. And they've scored the same amount of goals as a Brentford team, who are 16th. And they couldn't get out in a Champions League group. Was Copenhagen and Galatasaray. The last team was Bayern Munich, but Copenhagen and Galatasaray. And he hasn't had a style of play, no, consistent style of play ever since he arrived. Under Ole, there were moments FC. That's what people call the moments FC. They relied on individual moments of skill. This season comes around, and it's been completely individual moments. All the results that they get has been because of individual moments. There's no pattern of play. There's no Ajax system. There's no beautiful Johan Cruyff kind of football. You don't see none of that. Man, 600 and more than 600 shots conceded in this Premier League. This is a lot of stats there, in like the bottom 5, bottom 6. It's just embarrassing. A team of Manchester United, a team with that, they should never be there. But we talk about the negative sides, but there are reasons why he might stay. Number one, this team has been so injury ravaged. We talk about this past game against Crystal Palace, they had no fit center backs. The center back partnership was Johnny Evans and Casemiro, and Johnny Evans was clearly playing injured. He shouldn't have been playing. He was playing for the badge. But yeah, they've suffered more than 60 injuries, and they've had players miss over 1,300 days. One of the most injury-ravaged teams in the Premier League. The defense, especially, they've had to use more than 10 different center back partnerships throughout the season. And some of his main guys that were performing last year for him, like a Luke Shaw, like a Tyrell Malacia, Lisandro Martinez, they have not been available at all. Varane, he's not been available. So they've had to go with Maguire and Johnny Evans and throughout the season, which is, let's face it, come on, it's 2024 and Manchester United are playing starting and playing with Johnny Evans, is difficult. And Ten Hag, he did have a good season last year. He did improve from the year that they had previously, finishing 6th. I'm talking about specifically last year. He did get them in the top 4, and he has reached the FA Cup final again. He won a trophy last year, and he's reached a second FA Cup final. So, he's had his positive moments at Manchester United, but they've also been very, very low moments this season. And he's had a lot of questionable moments in style of play. I don't see the way he survives. I just think the pressure is growing day in, day out, and I believe that the end of the season is going to finish ugly for them, and that's the last thing he can afford. So I really, really think Erik Ten Hag might be in big, big trouble at Manchester United. But I'm very interested to see how their end of the season goes.